Good. How many did y'all have? 5, 6, 7. That's usually it's about 6 that y'all have.
And then Brenda, 6.
All right. Good. I've heard that's been going really, really well. So it makes me happy.
Brenda's a good teacher.
So I'm hoping when the new year comes around, we can convince some of these folks that make all these New Year resolutions to exercise more. You know, hey, we got once a week. Come on out. Did y'all meet upstairs?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's much better up there because
The floor's carpet.
yes, and because you know those aerobic mats are so thin, and it's kind of hard to get up and down on that floor down there.
When I came in today and saw that the tables hadn't been moved, I was like, I bet they met upstairs again.
We did, and it's so much nicer up there with the carpet.
Well, y'all should be okay until you grow to about 10, 12. Then I don't know if the floor could take it all, if y'all have enough room up there. But that would be a good problem to have. If, oh, look, we can't meet upstairs in the room anymore.
We would still have room for about 3 or 4 more mats.
I think so, yeah. You should be able to get 10 up there. Should be able to get 10 at least.
If we could just keep Brian from talking.
Did Brian come? Oh, little Brian. I was like, Brian coming out and doing aerobics? I was thinking big Brian.
Little Brian. He's a talker.
Good luck on getting him not to talk.
I understand. I'll let you try children's time one Sunday when he's here and see how that works.
But he wants to talk over the music, and he wants to talk to the prayers, and he just wants to talk all day.
Well, what is the situation with Big Brian? I mean, he used to come all the time.
To Bible study?
Yeah, he was just a regular.
Yeah, they both came
Yeah.
quite a bit for the first year that I was here.
I mean, you know, yeah, and they came very regular. And I mean, he was always, you know, adding to the conversation.
Well, I know it was about the time that he was diagnosed with this stuff that that was taking a lot out of him, and they stopped coming then. So I'm not sure if it's just they had never.
I don't even know exactly when he's diagnosed.
He had. I don't know if he's advertised a lot.
Well, maybe
of it,
don't worry about
yeah.
it. I don't need to know. I just know that I just missed. You know, I wish he could still come.
Yeah. Well, I think he's able to now. I just don't know if they're back in the habit of, because every time I talk to Brenda or something, I'm like, yeah, we need to get back up there. We just never do.
I'll get him to.
Drag him up here, Diane.
He every day when he'd be kind of first almost in line over there parked by the buses, and I'd go over there and talk to him every day after I started my bus. And he's always reading the Bible, always.
Yeah.
He's probably real smart. He's probably like Al. I mean, Stan. He's real good with the Bible.
Well, he gave me a book that I've read that we're going to do a short study on, probably up on Sunday schools, like the 101 Scientific Proofs of the Bible or something like that. I don't know if he was handing them out one Sunday. They're pretty interesting.
I wish I didn't. I must have been here.
I've got mine if you ever want to borrow it. It's I said about out of their 101 truths, I have found 20 that are actually good, plausible truths. The others seem like stretches. I mean, yeah, to some it might be great comfort to see that, but to me in study, I'm like,
I understand.
that's good, but it's.
Yeah, I'd like to see that too.
Yeah, I've got one upstairs. I can let somebody borrow it, I think, or there might be one. Actually, there might be one sitting back here. Look and see. So I thought I saw one just laying. No. Don't know. It disappeared.
That's-
But it's an interesting, it's just short little blurb, so I wish it went into more details about some of the history, because I was like, I don't know if I believe that. I'm going to have to look that up. Alright.
Think it's us.
I don't know how fast. I was going to give Tony one more minute till that clock got there, and we'll see.
Yeah.
If not, it might just be us. And anybody, well, whoever or one person who's watching online, which is probably Diane.
Mhm.
Diane, say hello if it's you, Diane. You can type in the chat and let us know you're here. If you're someone else, say hello too. We'd love to know who's with us. Yeah, I'm hoping, if you can get them back, I'm hoping we get a couple more back with, if I say I'm going to feed y'all. And if you have any requests, let me know.
Yeah.
Not chicken for Diane.
Steak, baked potato, and a salad.
You do realize, like, the steak is, chicken is so much cheaper than steak. You do realize this is the thing. Oh,
No comparison as far as taste.
well, it depends on how it's cooked. My mother-in-law, my wife will say this, her hamburgers, or I mean, if she gets a steak or a hamburger, it might be easier to chew a hockey puck. That's how well done she likes her steak.
I like mine medium rare.
See, being a church of this, I would have to cook them at least medium rare or excuse me, I would have to at least cook them medium to medium well for health stuff here. I couldn't cook a medium rare steak. You're not allowed to serve steak like in something like this. I think you're supposed to have it over 160 degrees internally, and medium rare is like 140.
I'd have to take
Because
the medium.
yeah, because like the consumers, all the menus like steakhouse and stuff, you read the bottom, it says we do not recommend eating rare steak. They have to put a disclaimer on the bottom of their menus, so you can order it that way, but they
I've always eaten my medium rare.
I don't know. All right, judges. Here's a good time if y'all have any questions about what we've talked about so far. Ask them now. Because if not, we're going to talk about Jephthah. I think we started talking about Jephthah last week.
We got to about, 5 or 6, 4 or 5 verses.
But we got to talk about who it was that he was the son of a prostitute.
I would like to just go over that one more time.
Sure.
Where it said he was a mighty man of valor, and he was the son of a harlot. And it says, and then Gilead beget Jephthah.
Yes. Gilead was his father. His mother was a prostitute. And to understand the hierarchy of marriage, you had your wives. Those were your really high ones. Then you had your concubines. Well, they still inherited something. You see that with old Abimelech.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then you have the prostitutes, not even related to you. And that's low of the low. So he has no inheritance whatsoever from his father.
Okay, well, this is where it kind of confused me. It says, now, when it goes to the second verse, it says, and Gilead's wife bare him sons, and his wife's sons grew up, and they thrust out Jephthah because he was not their real brother. He was the brother
of a prostitute, not even brother of a concubine, but a brother of a prostitute.
and said unto him, thou shalt not inherit in our father's house, for thou art the son of a strange woman. Okay, I understand that based on the hierarchy you're talking about. And then he fled from his brethren and dwelt in the land of Tob, and there he gathered what we talked about with vain, worthless men,
The rogues.
and then went out with them.
Yes.
So, okay, I got it.
Okay. So essentially, he was a pretty good guy, strong man, a good leader, a good warrior. His brothers didn't want him around. They were afraid that he would use force, more than likely, to take part of an inheritance which they didn't think he deserved. So they banded together, ran him out of town. So at this point, he's out of time, and while he's basically exiled from his home, the Ammonites begin to make war on Gilead as well. Okay. Now I don't think we've talked about the tribal arrangements that they have. We'll get to this in a few minutes, but throughout the time Judges, since they've entered in the land of Joshua, there has been kind of a cord between the tribes saying if one of them is in trouble, everybody else is supposed to come and help the one that's in trouble, because they're all descendants of Jacob. As you've seen so far, that hasn't really worked out so much, but that plays a big issue later on. So the Ammonites come in and attack Israel, specifically Gilead. And so the leaders of Gilead are looking for a leader. And that's where we are in verse 4 and 5. It says, the elders of Gilead went to get Jephthah from the land of Tob. Come, they said, be our commander so we can fight the Ammonites.
So what they went to get him, why did they choose him? Why?
Well, apparently he was so strong.
They said he was a mighty man.
Yes.
The first verse. But rather than go get his brothers, or
he would have probably, and this goes back to one of the reasons his brothers tried to band together on it. He was probably a very large, powerful man, very strong, very adept in battle and warfare. I mean, he survived as a rogue and an outlaw, so he's got some skills and some leadership. So his brothers were so afraid of him because of these good attributes that's why they banded together to run him out, for fear that he might and he would be able to take their inheritance from them. So they knew of him. He grew up in these towns with these elders. It probably wasn't until the father was starting to get sickly and old that the brothers looked around and goes, you know what? Before he gets any ideas, we got to get him out.
yeah.
So he had grown up. They would have known his potential and his abilities. So come, they said, be our commander so we can fight the Ammonites. Jephthah said to them, didn't you hate me and drive me from my father's house? Why do you come to me now when you're in trouble? The elders of Gilead said to him, nevertheless, we are turning to you now. Come with us to fight the Ammonites, and you will be our head over all who live in Gilead. Jephthah answered, suppose you take me back to fight the Ammonites, and the Lord gives them to me. Will I really be your head? The elders said, the Lord is our witness. We will certainly do as you say. So Jephthah went with the elders of Gilead, and the people made him head and commander over them. And he repeated all his words before the Lord in Mizpah. Then Jephthah sent messengers to the Ammonite king with the question, what do you have against us so that you have attacked our country? The king of the Ammonites answered Jephthah's messengers, when Israel came up out of Egypt, they took away my land from the Arnon to the Jabbok, all the way to the Jordan. Now give it back peaceably. All right. So first we have Jephthah being made essentially leader over this tribe, over this area, going from being complete outcast to being leader by some of the same people. And those elders would have been his family members. Those that either ran him out or stood by as he was run out. And his brothers. They would have been some close relations to him. And they're the ones that are saying, look, we need you to come back. The threat is this dire. Come back, and not only will you get your father's inheritance, but you're going to be made leader of our entire group. So he goes back and forth, but he eventually says yes. And he goes, but he does something here. He questions them. Are you sure you're going to do this? Are you sure this is what's going to happen? I'm going to go fight them, win for you, and then you're going to kick me out again. So the people swear by God. And not only that, when he gets back, that he makes the people again repeat the words in what is essentially their hub, their big city, in front of an altar in front of God, saying, God is our witness. You are our leader, our commander from henceforth. Alright? And then Jephthah's first act of leadership is not to fight. We go back and we look at all the other judges and how, they went to battle, they killed, they warred, they drove knives. His first act was to try to peaceably solve the solution.
Mm-hmm.
He sends messengers to the king of the invading army and goes, what's going on? Why don't you leave us alone? The king's response selfishly is, give us back our land. Why do you think Jephthah would have done this? Why this strategy?
Trying to be diplomatic?
Yeah, why not just crush them like all the judges before him?
You would think with his background he would have just attacked. I mean, being, with the outlaws or whatever. I mean, I'm sure that was a rough group, and they probably would hit first and talk later. So I found that too when I was reading it, that he was trying to be diplomatic and say, hey, do you really want to do this? But why he would have done that, I don't know.
Enlighten us, Diane.
I don't know. Why not?
I mean, is he a very religious person?
You would think that it would lead us to believe, with the Spirit of the Lord coming upon him, him giving in only after they make the promise before God, that he does have some respect for God.
Well, I mean, is that something, would God just let it happen, or would he influence him to do that?
That's a good question. Personally, I think both. I think a lot of this comes from his situation of being forced out and having to live on the outlaws, and the grief that it caused him and the resentment that he may have had for his own family by being forcibly removed. So, to me, the ones, and I don't know if this is true, but I would think that the ones who have experienced the harshest senses of betrayal and being outcast and of war would be the last ones to want to do it again.
Right.
So I think that might have been his motivation. Okay, before we go fight again, let's go see if we can settle this in a nice, easy, calm manner. So he sends a messenger and the king refuses. It did not work at all. But then he sends a second letter and he explains to them, starting in verse 14 and 15 all the way down through 27, why the people are, or why he thinks, or why they shouldn't fight, why the Ammonites should just be moving away. And I'm not going to read all of it, but my favorite verse in the entire thing is verse 24. Essentially, it's the story of the Israelite people coming in and then asking for safe passage into the promised land, and some kingdoms refusing them, so they go around, and some kingdoms refuse them, so they go around. Some kingdoms refuse and attack them, so they fight back and take their land and have it essentially this land via conquest. So much so that it was recognized by the neighbors who didn't do anything, that they peaceably went around because they said don't come through. So it was recognized by other states, recognized by conquest, and he gets to verse 4 and he says, will you not take what your God, Chemosh, gives you? Likewise, whatever the Lord our God has given us, we will possess. Man, think of that slap in the face. Earlier on in the book we had, let Baal handle his situation, and let Baal take care of it, and let the Lord protect it. And now it's like, well, let Chemosh give you what land is yours, and let the Lord give us what land is ours, and let's deal with that. So I'm wondering at this point if he's being peaceable or if he's trying to egg him on, trying to get a rise out of this king after having rejected it. because it sounds all nice and poetic until you get to that point, and it's like, well, if you think you got the best claim, if you think your God's giving it to you, it's yours, but if God's giving it to us, it's ours. Are you...
Well, I guess at that point he realized that, his efforts to end it peacefully probably weren't going to work.
And to some point, maybe he's appealing to their history, but to me, I was reading that and I got down, I was like, it's a little questionable there. But of course, the king paid no attention to this message. So we've had the first interaction, and I find this interesting. It is in verse 29. I'll start reading here because this is some very interesting. It says the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah. We have no instance of the Spirit coming down before this.
Right.
So the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah. He crossed Gilead and Manasseh, passed through Mizpah of Gilead, and from there he advanced against the Ammonites. And Jephthah made a vow to the Lord, if you give the Ammonites into my hands, whatever comes out of the door of my house to meet me when I return in triumph from the Ammonites will be the Lord's, and I will sacrifice it as a burnt offering. Then Jephthah went over to fight the Ammonites, and the Lord gave them into his hands. He devastated 20 towns from the Aurora to the vicinity of Minnith, as far as Abel Karem. Thus Israel subdued Ammon. All right, so he goes out. The king rejects his letter. The Spirit of the Lord fills him, and he goes out to do battle. Now, what do you think of how Jephthah handles this? What about his vow that he makes here?
I'm not sure when I read it, I really understood it that whatsoever cometh forth of the doors of my house to meet me,
Mm-hmm.
when I return in peace, shall surely be the Lord's, and I will offer it up. What does he mean? Out of his door.
What does he expect him to be there?
Okay. Well, see, the custom was, essentially he's talking about his own home. He's talking about his home. And while he was away at war, his family would have gathered in his home. Animals, children, ants, people would have gathered in the family home and waited as he was off
Is
to
he
war.
actually offering one of his own family as a sacrifice to the Lord?
He is expecting a possible human sacrifice. So not necessarily. I mean, he could have 20 dogs that like to greet him, and as soon as the doors open, or chickens. I don't know, something else. But whatever he's saying, when I approach my house, whatever comes out that front door, that is going to be the sacrifice to the Lord.
That's what I thought. I thought that was, it could be your wife. It could be,
It could be. Now, but the reason I said, don't we do that too? Open-ended prayers. God, if you just get me through this, I will do whatever you want me to do.
Yeah.
I mean, Diane, you've never had one of those prayers?
Oh, yeah.
So I'm wondering, what is his mentality that's causing him to pray such a prayer? I mean, I know when I've prayed prayers like that, it's, I have very little faith in myself and very little faith at this point that God's going to help me through this. So I try to bargain with God.
Well, the Spirit of the Lord had just came upon him. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you'd think, was he still wasn't confident that he still was trying to convince God to help him with the victory, even at the cost of sacrificing. I didn't understand that either.
So I think it's, Diane, what do you think before I say what he is?
I don't know why he would want to sacrifice.
Anything. Well, you have to understand, one, the sacrifice was their way of showing gratitude. So, having a sacrifice, coming home from war and offering up the youngest calf or, the dove or something, it would be something that he would do normally. Coming home and making a sacrifice of thanks would be a normal practice.
It wasn't normally possible to be a human being.
No, no, not normally. To say, yeah, I'm gonna make a sacrifice in the home, but I'm gonna leave it open-ended is the iffy part.
Yeah.
And for me, that either shows an extreme zealousness, like he's been overcome by the Spirit so much that he's not even thinking straight anymore, or a lack of confidence in the power of God, saying, Lord, I'm going to make, if you let me through this, I'm going to make an even greater sacrifice than the normal calf. It will be your choosing. Whatever comes out of the door, that's what I will do. If you will just get me through this. And I think I personally lean on the side of he's doubting, even at this point, even with the Spirit of God on him, he is doubting. And it doesn't end very well for him, if you've read ahead.
Yes.
That was his daughter.
Yep. When Jephthah returned to his home in Mizpah, who should come out to meet him but his daughter,
His only child.
dancing to the sound of tambourine. She was an only child. Except for her, he had neither son nor daughter. When he saw her, he tore his clothes and cried, "Oh, my daughter, you have made me miserable and wretched, because I have made a vow to the Lord that I cannot break." "My father," she replied, "you have given your word to the Lord. Do to me just as you promised. Now that the Lord has avenged you of your enemies, the Ammonites. But grant me this one request. Give me 2 months to roam the hills and weep with my friends, because I will never marry." "You may go," he said, and he let her go for 2 months. She and the girls went into the hills and wept because she would never marry. After the 2 months, she returned to her father, and he did to her as he had vowed, and she was a virgin. From this comes the Israelite custom that each year the young women of Israel go out for 4 days to commemorate the daughter of Jephthah, the Gileadite. Alright, so he did not turn out very well for him.
And the Lord didn't stop him from doing it.
I'm about to say, so why do you think it turned out like this? Why didn't the Lord pull an Isaac? Get the knife going down and hold on. You were pretty close. See, she wasn't the first thing that really came out of your house. That mouse was. Why not?
Obviously, it was to teach a lesson of something that, trust me when I tell you or inspire you, you don't have to go, or, I don't know, like I said, I just don't recall, and I'm far from the Bible, where, from this point on, is there any, did it happen again where humans are, where someone would
Sacrifice a human like this?
to the Lord?
Not to my knowledge.
Yeah, I've never heard of it.
Again, another
It wasn't a wise decision what he did, and he paid for it.
And for me, that's why I lean.
Solomon, David's son,
was killed.
Killed.
God took his life,
Yeah.
but it wasn't
and he didn't.
necessarily like up on an altar
No.
sacrifice.
No.
That was punishment for his
Okay.
So this instance is why I think it leads back to a lack of faith. Because I feel if it was a vow made in faith, then God would have honored it and had a wonderful thing. But one made of lack of faith, he's telling Jephthah, who's going to lead for another 6 years after this and continue to be in it, says, your lack of faith, to try to bargain with me, to try to cajole and try to win favor with me, when I've already sent you my Spirit to guide you and give you victory, has caused you to lose something that is precious to you. I think that's the reason that it played out like it did. Now, I can't say for sure, I don't know the mind of God, but the series there seems like that's the reason it played out.
It's another one not to do it.
I'm about to say, don't y'all really want to do judges at Bible school? And Jephthah gathered a mighty host and, showed his brothers that it's not about your past, but about the present. And he led them to a mighty victory. And he came home and sacrificed his only daughter. Good point to end on there. A lot of them are really good. You lead up to a certain point, and if you stop,
Yeah.
it looks pretty good. Yeah. He got back at his brothers. He lived a decent life. He stayed and pleased the Lord in the Spirit, and he won. And you just leave out that last little part.
And but as you said before, even last week, that they do it warts and all.
Yeah. This is one.
Somebody could have cut it off right before.
Yeah, I was about to say. Or put, like I said, put in the edited version with the cat or the dog or something else right out the door first.
Yeah.
I mean, I know dogs are family, but reading it 100 years later, there would be a different level between beloved dog and only daughter.
You got it.
I love my dogs, but if I'm running back into the fire once the baby's born and I only can grab one, I can tell you which one I'm grabbing.
The baby.
I'll grab the baby and kick the gate open on my way out, I love my dogs, but if they're rewriting it and want to include that, they would tone it down a little bit. But it's also interesting how much. The other thing is how she accepted it.
That's what I thought.
She accepted it. And I was like, well, if this is what you promised the Lord, you see, her faith is stronger than his at this point. You promised her, that's just fine. Just let me have 2 months to grieve.
But at least it shows that she was raised in a family that, believed in God and was willing to,
Well, in a sense, his act of sacrifice was also an act of faith and of goodness, because they were very strong in keeping their word. To keep a covenant or to break a covenant was one of the highest sins that they could commit. And this, if you said it, it was a covenant, especially if you said it to God or in the presence of God. You did not break those under any circumstances whatsoever.
that goes back to the group of men that we studied that had vowed to kill Paul.
Oh, yeah, some of those, you don't.
And, I mean, they were bound and determined to do it.
Yep.
And he had to leave, and, that's when he was under protection.
The governor.
Of the governor.
Yeah, see, they actually had to break their word because they vowed not to eat nor sleep until Paul was dead, and then he escaped.
Yeah.
So either they all died of starvation, or they claimed extreme circumstances.
Yeah.
But he knew how much it was, and his daughter knew even more how important it was to keep faith with the Lord and to keep with that. And I think that's probably why even at that point the Lord would allow them to have that 2 months to grieve and to live and to still a horrible, sad story.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
All right. So any questions about Jephthah to this point? Because his glory days aren't over yet. He still has some very iffy. I don't know if they're good nor they're bad. They're just things that happen to him. So any questions about 12?
11 or 12?
11, sorry. We haven't got to 12 yet.
I'm going to be honest. I had read 11 again today, but I haven't read 12. It's very short.
Yeah, it's
So
not.
you can
Yeah, we'll read it.
the whole thing.
We'll read it and then we'll talk about it, because it's very short. And the second half are 3 more of the minor prophets. So I'm gonna read the first 7 verses. says, the men of Ephraim called out their forces, crossed over Zaphon, and said to Jephthah, why did you go to fight the Ammonites without calling us to go with you? We're going to burn down your houses over your head. Jephthah answered, I and my people were engaged in a great struggle with the Ammonites, and although I called, you didn't save me out of their hands. When I saw that you wouldn't help, I took my life in my hands and crossed over to fight the Ammonites. And the Lord gave me the victory over them. Now why have you come up today to fight me? Jephthah then called together the men of Gilead and fought against Ephraim. The Gileadites struck them down because the Ephraimites had said, you Gileadites are renegades from Ephraim and Manasseh. The Gileadites captured the fords of the Jordan leading to Ephraim, and whenever a survivor of Ephraim said, let me cross over, the men of Gilead asked him, are you an Ephraimite? If he replied, no, they said, all right, say Shibboleth. If he said Sibboleth, because he could not pronounce the word correctly, they seized him and killed him at the fords of the Jordan. 42,000 Ephraimites were killed at that time. Jephthah led Israel 6 years. Then Jephthah the Gileadite died, and he was buried in the town of Gilead. The Ephraimites are Jews. They are part of the same area, the same tribe. They're part of that tribal coalition. You know, you're in trouble, you call, I come and help.
But what was the truth? It didn't say over here he called them in chapter 11, did it?
Well, it doesn't, but he might not have been the one to call them. At the end of chapter 10, we have the people of Gideon going, we need help, we need help, we need leaders. So we can probably safely assume that they sent out the word then, hey, we're in trouble, the Ammonites are coming, give us help.
But boy, to be to the point that they were willing to go and burn their houses and kill them, I guess, because they didn't let them help. That's
So why? Okay, why? What do you think the motivation here is? Pride. Some of you remember the Ephraimites are the same ones who pulled this number with Gideon. No, I said, you killed him. You did all this. Why didn't you let us? You're overshadowing our great things. Why did you rout this entire army?
Somehow he made them feel better.
Gideon did. Gideon told them, he said, well, but you have taken down these two prominent leaders, and I have just taken down minions. Your accomplishments are much, much greater than the ones I had. Jephthah has no diplomacy whatsoever here. But so why do you think the Ephraimites are so mad at this point?
Did it have to do with it? Did they not get some land they wanted?
Close. Probably spoils.
Spoils.
They see the Ammonites coming in. They see a Gilead that's, disorganized, no leadership, and they're saying, "Oh, well, we're not getting involved in that. We're not going to touch that. We're not going to waste our men." But then all of a sudden, Jephthah comes along, wipes out the Ammonites. They get to collect all the spoils from this massive army. They get riches, they get horses, they get armor, they get all these things. And the Ephraimites are going, well, hang on a second. Where's ours? And they storm across to blame them, to say, hey, look, you didn't call us and you denied our right to help you, so we're going to take what you owe us by force. Is essentially the situation that they're saying. You didn't call us when you had an army or when you had the Lord's favor and you were going to win and got all this stuff. So because you didn't call us, we're going to take it by force.
Well, had they not asked for help?
They did, but they probably, more than likely, The Gideonites probably asked them for help when it looked like they were going to lose. When it looked like they didn't have the Lord's favor and couldn't win. And I think that's what Jephthah was saying about midway through, you know, and although I called, you didn't come to save me, save us, save our people out of the hands. So when I saw you wouldn't help, I took it in my own hands and attacked. So he said, look, we called, you didn't come to us, so I came along and we did it ourselves, and now you're mad about it. So the Ephraimites in this case, according to what we know in the scripture, were extremely wrong. They violated that tribal agreement of help. They've now encroached into another side, across the Jordan, into another land to try to take some of the riches. And Jephthah is having none of that. So we don't get much dialogue. It's just, you know, now you've come over today to fight me. Okay, fine. You came to fight, we're going to fight. He calls up this army. He's been a great leader for God. He's routed the Ammonites. They have lots of new horses and toys and high morale, and they come swooping in and they crush the Ephraimites. And they do it tactically. They actually hit them and then go around them to block off the retreat. They block the river Jordan where they can retreat back into their homeland. And there they wait for any of the straggling army men to cross, and they give them a test. Now, does the test make sense to you?
Well, they're all Israelis.
Yes.
Israelites, so you'd think they would pronounce things the same way. No?
We're all United States, but if I hold up a can of soda, what are you going to call it?
Coke.
What are people up north going to call it?
Pop.
Okay.
But I mean, it's more or less so, but it's pronouncing the same word.
Yes, but I mean, even...
we might have a southern accent, and you go, hey.
Well, I mean,
around here.
that's part of what it is. Essentially, I guess the best way I could describe this is, us from the South, when we say you all, we say y'all. Or you all, or you alls, or use alls. I think my cousin does it like that. So we're essentially saying the same thing, but we don't pronounce certain. It might be the same root, the same meaning, but we pronounce it with a different inflection or a different letter. Here it's the same thing. They're talking about the same word, and I think...
And you can see how they hyphenated differently.
Yeah. Well, the biggest is the H.
Mm-hmm.
The
There's
people...
no H in the second.
Yes. The people from Gideon had strong emphasis on the sh. And the people on the other side of the river were just s. That was the biggest emphasis on that first little syllable of how they entered into the word.
That cost $42,000.
You think somebody would overhear the guy from?
Change that. I'm saying that.
How does?
Or maybe I better turn around and go the other way.
Yeah, well, back towards where the army is. Because remember, they're fleeing because the army has crushed them and forced them that way. It's a very interesting test, but it also shows, that they have become divided as a people.
Different, even though they're
Of the same descendants.
Mm-hmm.
And they're relatively close neighbors. A river separates them, but there is still enough difference that the people have started dividing and taking up their own.
And you're right. If we were at the river and people with a Boston accent were trying to come through,
We would know.
This guy ain't one of us.
We would know. It's the same. It's the cultural dialect. I was reading my commentary that said this is a cultural dialect thing. It is the same word pronounced two different ways. So This is a scary thought, though.
Yeah.
Again, Jephthah is a very brilliant, strong, take nothing lying down kind of guy, but he had his flaws. But he did lead Israel for 6 years. Because I imagine after this, the Ephraimites and the all the other ones are like, okay, sure, yeah, we'll follow your lead. If you say we need to come and battle, we'll come and battle. All right, then after Ephraim, it says, after him, Ibzan of Bethlehem led Israel. He had 30 sons and 30 daughters. He gave his daughters away in marriage to those outside his clan, and for his sons he bought in 30 young women as wives from outside his clan. Isban led Israel 7 years. Then Isban died and was buried in Bethlehem. After him, Elon, the Zebulites, led Israel 10 years. Then Elon died, and he was buried in Aijalon, the land of Zebulun. After him, Abdon, son of Hillel, from Pirathon, led Israel. He had 40 sons and 30 grandsons who rode on 70 donkeys. He led Israel 8 years. Then Abdon, son of Hillel, died and was buried in Parathion in Ephraim, in the hill country of the Amalekites.
I guess they were kind of uneventful.
Real short.
Well, it is, but
Short and sweet.
But you can see some of the, I can see in some of them the ups and the downs and some insights into the people. For example, the last guy, Abdon, he was from Ephraim, the land that just came over to try to steal money because they felt shorted. And God raised up out of him, and he was wealthy. He had 40 sons and 30 grandsons and 70 donkeys, one for each of them. So it shows that Ephraim, the people there prized possessions quite a bit, because that kind of gives some insight into why they kept attacking or doing what they did, because they wanted more stuff. But still, that people were righteous and were listening to God in there. If you look at Ibzan, the first one here, as I talked about, you could see the tribes starting to drift apart, to become separate. Well, one of the things that he does is he takes all his sons and all his daughters, and he sends his daughters to be part of other tribes, to marry in other tribes, to maybe connect and pull the tribes back together, and has wives brought in for his sons to marry from other tribes to try to again establish more connections.
But sure, they both pronounce words the same way.
Yeah, man, that's a hard habit to break. I said,
You ain't gonna get taught that way.
that's a hard habit to break, to change how you speak. You have to live somewhere a very long time to pick up their dialect, and even then, there are some things that cannot be changed.
Well, that went on for a long time, the English marrying the French, and even, just to try to prevent war.
Prevent war, strengthening bloodlines.
Yeah.
That's kind of, when I read, it doesn't say it, but that's kind of what I read when I see this. I was like, man, this guy's pretty smart. He's trying to consolidate and, pull this nation
It's a lot harder
together.
to hate somebody if your daughter's married to him, or your son's got a wife. You
Well,
might be a little less likely to,
Especially if you got grandchildren.
yeah.
So so as I said, there's not much about these three, but there's a little bit that we can glean from their actions or where they're from. All right, so any questions about
Well,
yeah, so sorry, I got a prayer request that blinked in on my computer.
no, not really.
All right.
It's just, studied his book. It was a very rough time.
It was an incredibly rough time. But you see, for me, I still see it as a rough time, but you see God amidst it. And for me, and we'll see this even more with Samson, God using situations for his glory to teach a lesson. Because chapter 13 starts the Samson epilogue, the Samson story. And Samson is a very weird judge compared to all the others that go before. We'll do a little intro to Samson and then we'll pray. But Samson never leads an army. He's never a leader of men. He's never like the stalwart stand up for his people against an invading army. He's more of, he stumbles into these problems, or he puts himself in these problems, and God uses certain situations to teach, in Samson's case, the Philistines a lesson. The first story of him actually getting retribution on the Philistines, we'll read in chapter 14, is where he's trying to marry a Philistine woman. He gives a riddle to the people. They get the answer to the riddle when they shouldn't be able to get the answer, and the bet was 30 undergarments. So Samson, in a fury, goes 20 miles into a large Philistine city, kills 30 men, steals their undergarments, and comes back and gives it to the guys. It's very, and all of Samson is similar to this. It's like, wait a second, what? So Samson is a very interesting case, and we'll finish up with Samson in the new year. And I said, the other thing I guess that's interesting about Samson that we get to right here at the beginning is, for all the other prophets, we usually pick up right in the middle of their life. Samson starts from the womb. We meet Samson before his mother is even pregnant, and go from there. We see his entire life kind of unfold. So that's what makes him a little bit different, or a lot different from all the others who are called after they're older. All right, so prayer requests for tonight.
Well, I've got 3.
All right, well, I bet you Tony and Twan are one of them.
You got it, because she went today, they sent her to their doctor to have her eyes checked, and she goes and takes the first pill Friday. They have to stay 8 hours. Then they have to go back Saturday, and then they have to go back Sunday. And my mother's youngest brother, my uncle, called me. He lives in Michigan. And he had to have, his name is Dale Crider. And he had to have a pacemaker put in. And then my mother's nephew that lives in Michigan, Mike Crider, had to take off one of his legs above the knee from blood clots.
Mike?
Mike Crider. And they went in, and he had surgery, and they had done the grafts, and the grafts collapsed. And he was getting no circulation, so there wasn't anything they could do. Well, I talked to him the other night, and he said, because Dale didn't tell me Mike was back in the hospital, so I called Mike, and he said he was back in the hospital, and he was going to have surgery the next day, and I reckon they were going to decide whether they had to take off the other leg.
Mm-hmm.
That's rough.
He's about 50.
No.
We'll definitely be praying for Mike and Dale this week.
Yeah, I'd like to do so. John and his wife, Mary, flew to Texas today to meet with the cancer doctor out there, and he'll be coming back Saturday. I don't know what sure he's going through a battery of tests, but he's hoping we could pray that he gets into one of the experimental groups, which would not cost him money.
Yeah,
You know,
the clinical trials.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one of those trials, and, so let's just pray that he gets some kind of encouraging news, from the cancer specialist, because he's still maintaining a good attitude, which it's gotta be hard to do.
And I've seen so many good reports from those trials, 'cause
Mhm.
that's what Juana has started in.
Mm-hmm.
But, and it is, they cost nothing.
Mm-hmm.
They pay for everything.
Yeah, they're funded.
Yeah, they said
They're
if they
funded.
wanted to stay in Nashville, they would pay for their rooms,
Mhm.
food, and everything. Of course, Juana didn't want to stay. She wanted to drive back home. So.
Yeah.
Well, he gets to come back and spend Christmas, but there's a chance he might even go back next week after Christmas, depending on what they determine.
We'll definitely be in prayer for all of them. I just got a message from Dorothy. She asked if we would pray for Emily Taylor. Said she's a fairly young woman who just found out she has Bell's palsy. So we'll pray for Emily Taylor. And if y'all haven't seen, I thank y'all for your prayers for my niece and my family's there. They got to come home today. So we are after an additional week in the hospital, they are very thrilled to be able to come home for Christmas.
You know,
That is a wonderful, wonderful blessing. So they're all doing well. So we're very thankful for that.
what did it cost him to stay the extra week?
Well, the baby was born not last Sunday, but the Sunday before.
Right.
And then they actually went home last Wednesday, but the next day they went to the pediatrician. The baby was pale, had jaundice, and had lost more weight than she should have. So they had to take her in to treat that, and it turned out her body temperature could not be regulated or something like that. It kept dropping too low. But they've taken care of her. Whatever it was is.
That's a scary time.
Is that when we visit them, they said, there's about there's a lot of good things that we can pick out here. But there are like 2 or 3 really big ones that if they're that, if it's that, we're terrified.
Yeah, that's good.
100 good things could go right, but if the one thing goes wrong, then. But she's at home. They're happy. They put a picture on Facebook, which means they had been home and had time to shower and nap.
Yeah.
So that is a wonderful thing. Anything else? Let's pray. God, we thank you for your study. We thank you for opening our eyes to what we even see as strange stories, Lord. But Lord, they have things to teach us. Things to teach us about faith. Things to teach us about standing strong. Things to show us how to live for you, Lord. So Lord, may we take these lessons into our heart to go out and to be faithful, to be heroes, to be strong for you and in your name, for others to see, that others may grow to know you, to see your love, your power, your kindness. But Lord, as we gather here tonight as your church, we want to lift up our loved ones, our friends, who need your help today, Lord. So we want to say a special prayer for Tony and for Twana especially, for Dale and Mike, Lord. It's such a tragic thing, Lord, that you will restore the blood clots, Lord, and just fix him so that he does not lose another leg, Lord. We're going to lift up John and Mary, and Lord, we just pray for right now encouragement in John's life, encouraging news, positive spirit, Lord, as he journeys through this cancer, Lord, that you will just be with him and heal him, Lord. Give him the strength to survive and just, Lord, be with him. We lift up Emily, Lord, for her new diagnosis, that you will bring her peace and understanding to see what this is, Lord, and then healing and strength to move forward with her life. Lord, for all these names, for all these people dear to our hearts, and those that are still written silently upon our hearts, we lift them up to you. Give them your power. Give them your strength. Give them your presence. For you are our great healer. You are our Emmanuel. And you love us beyond all things, Lord. So, Lord, we lift our hearts up to you. In the name of Jesus Christ we pray. Amen. All right, folks. Well, it's good to see y'all tonight.
Yes.
Big crowd.
That's fine. We had somebody watching online. Say, Al, I sent you an email earlier today.
Okay.
The last order of business for the other last order of business for the SPRC committee for the end of the year.